The Empire's approach. The Galactic Empire had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Their warships, massive and powerful, were a symbol of their dominance. No one dared challenge them, not the Zorathians, not the Elders, and certainly not the humans, who were seen as nothing more than a primitive, weak species on the edge of the galaxy. But something strange was happening. The Empire's intelligence network had picked up something unusual. A fleet of ships, identified as human, was approaching their territory. At first, the Empire dismissed it. After all, humans didn't have the advanced technology needed to challenge an empire like theirs. Their ships were outdated, slow, and poorly armed. Yet the reports kept coming in. Dozens of human ships, possibly more, heading straight for the heart of Empire space. The Empire's leaders gathered in a massive war room on the capital planet, a place where strategies had been drawn and battles had been won for hundreds of years. The room was filled with tension as the Empire's finest generals and fleet commanders debated what to do. Was it an attack, or was it a simple misunderstanding? One thing was certain: the humans were coming, and no one knew why. Could it be a trick? General Vex, the leader of the Empire's military, asked. His voice was calm but filled with concern. Are they trying to provoke us, hoping to lure us into a trap? They don't have the resources for such a plot, Admiral Zoran replied, her tone dismissive. We've had dealings with the humans before. Their technology is backward. This is likely just a small fleet lost in our territory. We should send a few ships to escort them out. Others in the room nodded in agreement. The thought of humans being a threat was laughable. They were weak, fragile creatures. The Empire had fought and conquered dozens of more advanced species without breaking a sweat. A fleet of human ships, it would be no different. But Vex wasn't convinced. He'd spent too many years in the military, dealing with enemies who underestimated others, to make the same mistake again. What if this is something different? What if they've developed new technology? We can't afford to take chances. The room fell silent. The idea of humans developing new technology was absurd, but the thought of underestimating them was even worse. The Empire had ruled for so long that arrogance had started to settle in. They were the most powerful force in the galaxy, and no one questioned that. But now, here were the humans, and something about their approach didn't sit right. After a long pause, Emperor Rylos, the supreme ruler of the Galactic Empire, spoke. His voice echoed through the room, sharp and decisive. Prepare the fleet. I want every available ship on standby. We will intercept these humans, and we will find out what they want. If they pose a threat, we will crush them. If they're lost, we'll escort them home. But no one crosses into our territory without permission. The command was clear. The fleet would be sent to deal with this mystery. But even as the orders were given, something lingered in the air. The generals and officers couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Humans had always been seen as weak, insignificant creatures, but could it be that they were hiding something more dangerous than anyone realized? As the fleet prepared for deployment, the Empire's ships moved into position. Massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying entire planets, began their slow journey toward the human fleet. Their engines hummed, the sound reverberating through the hallways of the capital. Vex watched as the fleet moved out. His mind raced, replaying every piece of intelligence they had gathered on the humans. There had been nothing that suggested they could pose a threat to the Empire. Yet the closer they got to the human fleet, the more uneasy he became. There were no communications coming from the humans, no attempts at negotiation, no signs of fear or retreat. This wasn't how humans acted. A part of Vex wondered if the humans were testing the Empire, trying to provoke them into a war. But if they were, why didn't they attack? Why hadn't they done anything yet? It made no sense. The Empire's fleet arrived at the edge of the human formation, and the commanders waited for the next move. What would the humans do next? Would they try to communicate? Or would they attack, as they had once done when they were just a fledgling species? Suddenly, The human ships, which had been drifting quietly in space, shifted positions. Their movements were quick and precise, and the Empire commanders were caught off guard. The ships didn't scatter in fear like the Empire expected. Instead, they formed a tight formation, as if preparing for something. The silence was eerie. Even though the humans weren't attacking, it felt like they were waiting for something. "Alert the fleet," General Vex commanded. "Prepare for any movement. I want a full scan of their ships. There's something wrong here." As the Empire's ships moved closer, the strange feeling in the air grew stronger. The human fleet didn't seem scared, nor did it seem like they were planning to attack. It was as if they were waiting for something. What were the humans planning? Why hadn't they responded to the Empire's presence? And why were their ships so quiet, so mysterious? The Empire commanders had no answers. But one thing was certain: this wasn't a simple situation, and the humans were no ordinary foe. The battle for control of the galaxy might just be beginning, and the humans were no longer the insignificant species they had once been. As the fleets stood face to face, the first signs of tension began to appear. Both sides were ready, but neither side knew what would come next. The Empire had no idea what they were about to face, and the humans, for their part, weren't about to make it easy for them. The human response. As the massive fleet of the Galactic Empire closed in on the mysterious human ships, tension hung in the air. The Empire's fleet, known for its overwhelming power, was ready to assert its dominance. But despite their size and strength, the Empire's commanders could not ignore the eerie silence from the human fleet. They were waiting, but for what? General Vex stood in front of the holographic display, studying the human ships that filled the screen. Each one was different from the others. Some were sleek and fast-looking, while others appeared more like old, beaten-up relics of the past. Yet all of them, despite their differences, had one thing in common: they were calm. No sign of panic, no hasty movements. It was as if they knew something the Empire did not. "Are they just waiting for us to make the first move?" Admiral Zoran's voice cut through the tension. As she turned to Vex, "This doesn't feel right. We should be making contact, but they haven't even attempted to communicate." Vex clenched his fists. He had a growing sense that the humans were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The human race had always been underestimated, dismissed as weak. But there was something about their silence that gave him chills. It was unnatural. If they were scared, they should have fled, or at least tried to negotiate. But they didn't. His mind raced back to his earlier thoughts. Could the humans have developed new technology? Something that made their old ships suddenly a threat? Or was this some kind of trap? "General," one of the junior officers spoke nervously, "we're getting a strange reading from one of their ships. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Vex's heart skipped a beat. A strange reading. That could mean anything. Could it be a weapon? Or was it some kind of hidden signal? Perhaps something to confuse their sensors. He quickly turned to his officers. "Prepare a full scan of their ships. I want everything. Sensors, communication frequencies, weapon systems, everything. Now," he ordered. As the scans began, the Empire's fleet commanders could only watch as the human ships remained still, seemingly unaffected by the growing tension. The Empire's warships, armed with the latest and deadliest technology, hovered nearby. Yet the humans didn't react. It was almost as if they were waiting for something beyond just a confrontation. On board one of the human ships, Captain Rachel Harris paced nervously. She was in charge of the largest human fleet ever assembled, and this moment would define the future of humanity in the galaxy. Despite all the preparation, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The Empire had never taken humanity seriously, and she knew it. It was something she had heard countless times. "You are nothing. Your species is insignificant." But now, the humans were about to show the Empire that they were wrong. "Captain," a voice came from behind her. It was Lieutenant Carter, her second in command. "We're receiving strange readings from their fleet. They're scanning us. Everything about us. They know something's different. Rachel nodded. Good. Let them scan. It's about time they learned the truth. She stepped forward, looking out over the vast emptiness of space. The Empire had no idea what they were up against. What they didn't realize was that the humans were no longer the defenseless species they once were. The human fleet wasn't just a few old ships cobbled together. It was a well-planned, highly advanced force, armed with technology that the Empire had never seen before. They had spent years developing this new fleet, pushing the limits of human ingenuity. And now, it was time to show the galaxy what they could do. The Empire was about to discover that underestimating humanity was the greatest mistake they could have made. Captain, Carter spoke again, we're ready to move forward. The Empire is closing in. What's the plan? Rachel took a deep breath. Hold your position for now. They think they have us cornered, but that's exactly what we want. We're not going to attack first. We're going to let them make the first move. And when they do, they won't know what hit them. The silence that filled the ship seemed to grow louder as the seconds ticked by. Rachel could feel the weight of the moment. She knew the future of humanity rested on this encounter. If they failed, it could mean the end of their existence. If they succeeded, the galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. Meanwhile, the Empire's fleet had finished scanning the human ships. General Vex looked at the data, his expression unreadable. There was something in the readings that didn't make sense. The humans had no advanced weapon systems, nothing that would suggest they could challenge the Empire. And yet their ships had somehow evaded every scan they attempted. It was like the human fleet was cloaked in some kind of strange energy field, something the Empire had never encountered. He gritted his teeth. There's something off about this. I don't care if they're humans or space dust. If they're hiding something, we'll find it. The moment they make a move, we engage, and we'll show them what happens when you mess with the Galactic Empire. But what Vex didn't know was that the humans had already made their move. They weren't hiding. They were simply waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the tension between the two fleets grew, the stage was set for a confrontation unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. One side would crush the other. But which side would it be? In the silence of space, the answer was about to reveal itself. The first strike. The tension in space had reached its peak. The Galactic Empire's fleet, poised to attack, had grown restless. The strange readings from the human ships still haunted General Vex's mind. What were they hiding? How could they remain so calm when they were facing one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy? It was clear that the Empire was expecting a swift victory. After all, the Empire's reputation for crushing lesser races was well known. They had never faced a force that could match their power. But this time, something was different. The humans were proving difficult to read, and Vex wasn't sure if that was a sign of strength or weakness. General, Admiral Zoran's voice cut through his thoughts. We're ready to engage. What are your orders? Vex looked over at her. The Empire's ships were armed and ready. It was time to show the humans their place. Engage the human fleet. Focus on disabling their ships. We'll capture them and learn what they're hiding. As the Empire's fleet surged forward, the first shots rang out, sending waves of energy blasts toward the human ships. The humans' response was unexpected. Instead of retreating or attempting to defend themselves, the human fleet split into smaller formations, dodging and weaving around the incoming fire with surprising precision. How are they moving like this? Vex muttered to himself, his eyes fixed on the screen. The human ships weren't just fast. They were incredibly maneuverable, almost as if they knew exactly where the blasts would land before they were even fired. On board the human flagship, Captain Rachel Harris stood in front of the holographic controls, her eyes scanning the chaos unfolding in space. The Empire had opened fire, but her fleet wasn't about to back down. The plan had always been to remain calm, to show the Empire that humanity was no longer the helpless species they once thought them to be. Lieutenant Carter, she ordered, activate the countermeasures. Let's see how well they handle a little surprise. Carter's fingers flew across the controls, and within seconds, the human ships began to glow with an eerie light. The energy fields that surrounded the ships were unlike anything the Empire had seen before. They could block incoming fire, deflecting the Empire's blasts with ease. The ships of the Galactic Empire seemed to struggle against the human shields, their energy blasts dissipating harmlessly into space. What in the galaxy is that? Vex gasped as he watched the spectacle unfold. The human ships were taking the Empire's fire with ease, barely even slowing down. He had expected to overpower them with sheer numbers, but this was something he had never seen before. The Empire's fleet continued its assault, but the human ships were now systematically dodging, countering, and firing back with incredible precision. One by one, the Empire's ships began to falter. The human shields weren't just defensive. They were offensive as well, causing damage to the Empire's warships as they retaliated with pinpoint accuracy. Admiral Zoran, report. Vex barked. We're losing ships, General, she replied, her voice tight with frustration. Their fire is deadly accurate. We underestimated them. They're not just defending. They're fighting back. Vex clenched his fists in anger. He couldn't believe it. The humans, the species that had once been considered weak and insignificant, were now fighting back in a way that was making the Empire's best commanders sweat. This was no ordinary fleet. This was a force to be reckoned with. On the human flagship, Captain Harris stood tall, her face grim but focused. She knew the first strike had gone well, but they couldn't afford to be overconfident. The Empire's forces were powerful, and they could still overwhelm her fleet if they weren't careful. Stay sharp, Harris ordered her crew. We've got them on the defensive, but we need to keep pushing. Don't let up. They're not going to retreat easily. The human fleet pressed on, striking the Empire's ships with relentless precision. The Galactic Empire had come to the battle with overwhelming strength, but humanity was showing them that strength wasn't always about numbers or firepower. It was about tactics, cunning, and resilience. General Vex could feel the pressure mounting. His fleet was faltering, and the human fleet, though outnumbered, was showing no signs of backing down. He wasn't sure how much longer he could maintain control of the situation. The longer the battle dragged on, the more desperate things became. He had underestimated humanity, and now it was costing him. Order the fleet to retreat, Vex ordered abruptly. We can't afford to lose any more ships. We'll regroup and come up with a new strategy. The order to retreat was given, but it was not an easy decision. The Empire's commanders were confused and frustrated. They had never been forced to retreat in such a humiliating fashion. It was clear that humanity had far more to offer than they had initially believed. As the Empire's ships turned to retreat, the human fleet didn't pursue. Instead, they held their ground, the eerie glow of their shields still lighting up the dark void of space. Humanity had made their point. They were no longer a species to be taken lightly. Back on the human flagship, Captain Harris allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Empire had been thrown off balance, but they wouldn't give up so easily. There would be more battles ahead, and next time, they would be ready. The stage had been set for a war unlike any other. The Empire had underestimated humanity, but now they were learning the hard way that the humans were a force to be reckoned with. The next phase of the battle was already beginning, and no one knew where it would lead. But one thing was certain: the humans would not back down. They would fight until the very end. The counterattack. The retreat of the Galactic Empire's fleet didn't mark the end of the battle. It was only the beginning. As the Empire regrouped in the vastness of space, their commanders scrambled to understand what had just happened. They had never expected the humans to be so well prepared, so resourceful, and so ruthless. Back aboard the human flagship, Captain Harris couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The first engagement had gone better than anyone had expected, but it was only one victory. The Empire would certainly regroup, and when they did, they would come back stronger. Harris knew the humans had to be ready for what came next. They couldn't afford to rest on their laurels. "Admiral Carter, status report," Captain Harris ordered as she stood before the holographic display. The human fleet was still intact, though battered from the fight. The damage was minimal, but the Empire would be back, and the next battle would be harder. "We've got some damage, but it's nothing we can't fix," Admiral Carter replied, his voice steady. "The new energy shields are holding up, and our ships are more maneuverable than we anticipated. If they come back at us, we'll be ready." Harris nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We need to prepare for the next phase. They'll be back, and we need to hit them harder." Meanwhile, aboard the Imperial flagship, General Vex was seething with frustration. The defeat in the first engagement had left him embarrassed, and it was clear that his commanders were equally rattled. The humans, though outnumbered, had used their advanced technology and tactics to outmaneuver the Empire's fleet, and now they were plotting their next move. "General, we've analyzed the human ships," Commander Zoran said, her tone clipped. "They've got advanced energy shields that we haven't seen before. Their tactics are unorthodox, but effective. We underestimated them." Vex slammed his fist on the console, his face twisted with anger. "Underestimated them? This is humiliating. How could we let this happen?" The commander didn't answer, but Vex could see the tension in her eyes. She, too, knew that this battle was far from over. "We've already sent word to the fleet commanders," Zoran continued. "They'll be ready for the next engagement." Vex's mind raced as he paced back and forth. He needed a new plan, a strategy that would not only crush the human fleet, but also restore the Empire's shattered pride. He couldn't afford another defeat. "We'll hit them where they're weakest," Vex declared, his eyes narrowing. "Prepare a full-scale assault. This time, we'll overwhelm them with sheer force. Their tactics may be clever, but we have the numbers and firepower to destroy them. It's time to show these humans who they're dealing with." As Vex formulated his plan, the human fleet was also preparing for the inevitable return of the Empire. Captain Harris stood before her crew, reviewing the latest intel. "We've already proven that the Empire is not invincible," she said, her voice steady but filled with resolve. "But we cannot take them lightly. We need to be smarter this time. They will come at us with everything they have. We must be ready." Lieutenant Carter spoke up. "They'll be expecting us to defend in the same way as last time. Should we change tactics?" Harris considered the question carefully. The Empire had already seen the strength of their shields, but their tactics might now be predictable. It was time to surprise the Empire once again. "We'll draw them in," Harris said, a sly smile crossing her face. "We'll make them think we're weaker than we are. Let them attack us, but when they do, we'll strike back harder than they expect. We'll use their overconfidence against them." Carter raised an eyebrow. "You want us to lure them in? It's risky." "Exactly," Harris replied. "Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them think they have the advantage. The moment they overextend, we strike." The plan was risky, but it was the only option. The Empire's fleet was still massive, and the humans knew they couldn't win through sheer force. Their only hope was to outsmart the Empire once again. Hours passed, and both fleets prepared for the next confrontation. The human ships remained in their position, waiting patiently, while the Empire's ships regrouped and strategized. General Vex was growing impatient. "Move in," he barked. "We strike now, before they have a chance to regroup. They've been too bold. We'll crush them." As the Empire's fleet surged forward, Captain Harris watched closely. She could feel the tension in her chest. It was happening. This was the moment they had been preparing for. The Empire was about to make its move, and the humans had to be ready. "All ships, hold your positions," Harris ordered, her voice calm but firm. "Let them think they've won, just a little longer." The Empire's fleet came closer, their weapons charged and ready. Harris's heart raced, but she didn't let it show. She had a plan, and it had to work. Suddenly, The Empire's ships opened fire, but Harris had anticipated the move. The human fleet began to move, darting around the Empire's fire with precision and speed. They had drawn the Empire in just as they planned. "Now," Harris shouted, "counterattack." The human fleet turned and unleashed a devastating barrage of firepower. The Empire's ships were caught off guard, their own ships now in the crossfire of the human fleet's counterattack. "Impossible." Vex's voice crackled over the comms. They were playing us. The humans had done it again, outsmarting the Empire. The tide of battle had turned, and this time, the Empire was on the defensive. As the Empire scrambled to adjust, Captain Harris stood tall, her heart pounding with adrenaline. The humans had proven their worth once again. And now, the Empire would have to rethink everything. The fight was far from over, but humanity had just made its biggest statement yet. The Empire had underestimated them once again, and this time, humanity would make sure they would never make the same mistake again. The Empire strikes back. The battle was far from over. While the human fleet had dealt a devastating blow to the Empire, it was clear that the Galactic Empire would not go down without a fight. The Empire's pride had been wounded, but they were far from finished. General Vex was furious, but his anger had only strengthened his resolve. His fleet would reclaim its honor. "I will not allow this humiliation to stand." Vex growled, his voice cold with rage. He paced around the command center of his flagship, his mind working rapidly. "Prepare a full assault. This time, we strike with overwhelming force. I want every available ship ready to launch within the hour." His officers hesitated, but they could see the fury in his eyes. They knew better than to question him now. "General," Commander Zoran spoke up cautiously, "our intelligence suggests that the humans are preparing for another counterattack. They are more resourceful than we anticipated." "I don't care how resourceful they are," Vex snapped. "We will crush them. We will show them that no one dares defy the Galactic Empire. This time, we hit them hard and fast before they can regroup." His orders were clear, and within minutes, the Empire's massive fleet began to move, preparing for an all-out assault on the human forces. The battle would be brutal, and the stakes were higher than ever. Meanwhile, the humans were not resting on their victory. Captain Harris stood at the helm of her flagship, staring at the vast expanse of space before her. The previous engagement had gone better than they had hoped, but Harris knew that the Empire would not give up easily. They had already shown their ability to strike hard and fast. "All ships, get ready," Captain Harris ordered, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We know they're coming. We need to be prepared for their next move." The human fleet had suffered minimal damage, but it was still nothing to ignore. They had lost some ships, and their supplies were dwindling. But the humans were more determined than ever to prove themselves to the Empire and to the galaxy. They had won one battle, but the war was far from over. "Captain," Lieutenant Carter spoke up, his tone cautious, "we've been monitoring their movements. The Empire is coming for us, and they're bringing everything they've got." "I know," Harris replied grimly, "but we'll be ready. This time, we fight smarter, not harder. We can't match their firepower, but we can outmaneuver them." The humans had no choice but to rely on their superior tactics and technology. Their ships were smaller, more agile, and equipped with cutting-edge technology that the Empire had yet to fully understand. The humans had already demonstrated that they could outthink their enemies. Now, they would need to do it again. The moment of truth was near. The Empire's ships were closing in, their weapons charged and ready. The humans knew they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If they were going to survive this next wave, they would need to act quickly and decisively. "All ships, initiate evasive maneuvers," Captain Harris ordered. "We're not going to let them catch us off guard again." The human fleet scattered, breaking formation and darting in every direction. The Empire's ships, larger and slower, tried to adjust, but the humans had already anticipated their moves. With precise coordination, the human ships launched a barrage of firepower, targeting the Empire's weaker spots. But General Vex was ready. He had expected this, and his fleet responded with brutal efficiency. The Empire's ships returned fire with devastating force, hitting the human ships with a fury that sent shockwaves through space. Braced for impact, Harris shouted as her ship rocked from the force of an enemy blast. But the humans weren't done yet. They knew the Empire's ships were strong, but their reliance on brute force left them vulnerable in other areas. "We need to take out their command ship," Harris said, her mind racing. "That's where Vex will be. If we can take down his flagship, we'll destabilize their entire fleet." Lieutenant Carter nodded. "We're with you, Captain." With a newfound determination, the humans focused their fire on the Imperial flagship, their weapons blasting through the void, hoping to strike a decisive blow. But Vex was prepared for this too. His ship was heavily armored, and it withstood the human barrage, its shields barely flickering. "You think you can beat me that easily?" Vex's voice crackled over the comms, taunting Harris. "You've done well, but this is where your luck runs out." Harris gritted her teeth. She knew that this wasn't over. The humans had underestimated the Empire's ability to adapt. But the humans had one advantage the Empire didn't: the will to fight. And that was something no fleet, no matter how powerful, could take away. "All ships, focus fire on their support ships," Harris ordered, a new strategy forming in her mind. "If we can take down their reinforcements, we might have a chance at getting to Vex." The humans' maneuverability allowed them to stay one step ahead of the Empire's slower ships. As the Empire's support vessels moved to defend their flagship, the humans exploited the gap, targeting the weaker ships. "Captain, we've taken out several of their support ships," Lieutenant Carter reported. "Their fleet is starting to falter." "Good," Harris said, a flicker of hope in her voice. "Now, we finish what we started." The Empire was in chaos, with their support ships falling one by one. General Vex's flagship was becoming more vulnerable. Harris knew this was their chance. The battle wasn't over, but the humans had taken the upper hand once again. As the human fleet pressed on, they fought with everything they had. The Empire's once mighty forces were now on the defensive. The humans had shown that they weren't to be underestimated, and the Empire had finally learned that lesson the hard way. In the vastness of space, with the future of the galaxy hanging in the balance, both sides knew that the next confrontation would be decisive. The human fleet was ready for whatever came next. The Empire would never forget the lesson they had learned today. Humanity was not to be underestimated. And Lieutenant Carter reported, his voice filled with urgency. "The Empire is mobilizing for a counterattack. They're bringing everything they've got." "I expected as much," Harris replied, not looking up from the tactical display. "Prepare the fleet for another round. We can't afford to lose our momentum." The humans were outnumbered, but they had learned that victory was not always about sheer numbers. It was about strategy, speed, and the will to fight. Harris knew that this battle was far from over, but she believed they could win. They had to. As the Empire's ships advanced, the humans readied their defenses. The battle was about to intensify. "All ships, engage at will," Harris ordered, her voice steady. "This is the moment we've been waiting for. We fight for our survival." The human fleet darted through space, evading the Empire's massive ships. The Empire's ships, though powerful, were sluggish in comparison. The humans used their speed to outmaneuver their larger enemies, striking quickly and then retreating before the Empire could retaliate. The Empire's forces, though angry and desperate, were beginning to crack under the pressure. "Captain, we've taken down several of their smaller ships," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice filled with excitement. "Their forces are starting to break apart." Harris nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Keep the pressure on them. Don't let up." But just as the humans seemed to gain the upper hand, a new threat emerged. From the depths of space, a massive warship, larger than any the humans had encountered before, emerged from the darkness. The Empire had brought their trump card into the fight. That ship, Lieutenant Carter whispered in disbelief. It's a dreadnought. We're not ready for that. The dreadnought was a fearsome sight. Its massive guns were capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single shot. The human fleet had never faced anything like it. But Captain Harris was undeterred. She had already seen what the Empire was capable of, and she knew this was just another obstacle to overcome. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Harris ordered. We can't take that ship head-on, but we don't need to. We just need to outsmart it. The humans continued their guerrilla tactics, using the dreadnought's size against it. The Empire's pride, the dreadnought, could move through space like a juggernaut, but it was slow and unwieldy. The humans exploited that weakness, staying just out of its reach and picking off smaller ships in the process. Captain, we're starting to break through their lines, Lieutenant Carter reported. The dreadnought is struggling to keep up with us. Good, Harris said, her voice calm but fierce. Keep up the pressure. We don't stop until they've been pushed back. The Empire's dreadnought fired again, its enormous cannons blasting space around the human fleet. The sheer power of the weapon caused shockwaves that rippled through the battlefield. But the human ships danced around the blasts, showing no fear as they darted between the massive guns of the dreadnought. But just as the humans seemed to be winning, disaster struck. The Empire had a secret weapon, a fleet of elite bombers equipped with advanced weaponry. They swooped in from the shadows, launching deadly strikes at the human fleet. Incoming, shouted Lieutenant Carter. They're going to hit us hard. Brace for impact, Captain Harris ordered, as the first wave of bombers descended upon them. The human fleet scrambled to respond, but the Empire's bombers were relentless. Explosions rocked the human ships, and several smaller vessels were lost in the chaos. Harris watched in horror as a blast struck close to her own flagship, throwing the crew into chaos. Status report, Harris shouted, gripping the command table. We've sustained some damage, Lieutenant Carter replied, his voice tight with worry. But we're still operational. We can keep going. Harris took a deep breath. She knew this wasn't over. The Empire had dealt a heavy blow, but the humans had proven their ability to recover. They had the will to fight, and as long as they had that, they could win. Reinforcements are on the way, Lieutenant Carter said, looking at the screens. We're not alone. Harris nodded, a grim smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Good. It's time to turn this battle around. We won't let them take us down. Not today. As the human fleet prepared for another wave of combat, the turning tide was clear. The battle wasn't over, but the Empire had underestimated the humans once again. Now, the human fleet was ready to take the fight to them. The final showdown was about to begin. And this time, the Empire would not be prepared. The final strike. The battlefield was a chaotic mess of debris, flashing lights, and the sounds of distant explosions. The Empire's once mighty fleet had been thrown into disarray, and now, with reinforcements arriving, the humans prepared for their final push. They had fought long and hard, but the real test was yet to come. Captain Harris stood at the command table of the human flagship, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The Empire's pride, the massive dreadnought, was still in play, but it was no longer the terrifying force it had once been. It was limping, its hull riddled with damage, and its weapons were firing less accurately with every shot. We've come this far, Harris said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Now it's time to finish it. Her officers nodded in agreement. The battle was far from over, but the tides had turned. The Empire's forces were retreating, their fleet shattered by the humans' relentless tactics. Now, with their reinforcements, the humans would push the Empire back once and for all. Prepare for the final assault, Harris ordered. We've taken down their smaller ships. The dreadnought is next. Understood, Captain, Lieutenant Carter responded. All ships are ready. We'll push them out of our skies. With a nod, Harris turned to the tactical display, her mind racing. The Empire's ships were still formidable, But they had no chance against the human fleet now. They had learned from their mistakes, adapted to every move the Empire made. And now it was their turn to strike. The human ships moved into position, circling around the dreadnought like predators closing in on their prey. The Empire's flagship loomed in the distance, its once proud form now weakened and vulnerable. Harris could see the fear in the eyes of the Empire's soldiers, even from a distance. "All ships, engage," Harris commanded, her voice a calm roar. "Let's show them what humanity is capable of." The human fleet surged forward, swarming the dreadnought from all angles. The Empire's forces attempted to regroup, but it was too late. The humans were too fast, too smart, and they had learned how to exploit every weakness the Empire had shown them. The dreadnought fired its massive weapons in retaliation, but the humans danced around the blasts, staying just out of reach. Lieutenant Carter watched the action unfold on the screen. "Captain, we're taking down their defenses. The dreadnought's shields are weakening." Harris smiled grimly. "Keep pushing. We can end this now." As the human ships continued their assault, the Empire's dreadnought struggled to defend itself. Its weapons were no longer accurate, and its shields flickered dangerously. The human fleet, with their superior agility, struck again and again, each hit weakening the massive warship. The Empire's remaining fighters attempted to make a stand, but they were no match for the humans' overwhelming numbers. One by one, the Empire's ships fell, their engines sputtering out, and their crews scrambling in desperation. "Just a little more," Harris muttered, her eyes locked on the tactical display. Finally, the moment arrived. The dreadnought's shields failed completely. With a final, desperate attempt, it fired one last blast. But it was too late. The humans launched their final strike, hitting the dreadnought with everything they had. The explosion was immense, a burst of light that filled the entire battlefield. When the light faded, the dreadnought was gone. The once mighty ship was nothing more than a cloud of debris, drifting aimlessly in space. "We did it," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice filled with disbelief. Harris didn't celebrate. She knew the battle wasn't truly over until the last Empire ship had been dealt with. But for the first time, she allowed herself a moment of relief. The Empire's strongest weapon had been destroyed. The Empire's remaining ships were in full retreat now. The humans had proved they were not to be underestimated. They had faced the might of the Galactic Empire and come out victorious. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. "All ships, continue pursuit," Harris commanded. "We're not letting them get away. Finish them off." The humans surged forward, their ships faster and more agile than the Empire's remaining fleet. One by one, the Empire's forces were eliminated, each ship falling before the unstoppable force of the human fleet. As the last of the Empire's ships fell, Harris let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The battle had been brutal, but they had won. The Empire had been defeated, and humanity had proven itself to be more than just survivors. They were conquerors. "Mission accomplished, Captain," Lieutenant Carter said, a grin spreading across his face. Harris allowed herself a small smile. "Yes, we did it. But we're not done yet. This is just the beginning." As the human fleet turned to return to their homeworld, the crew of the flagship stood tall. They had faced the impossible, had been pushed to their limits, and had triumphed. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they knew better. The humans were ready for whatever came next, and this time, no one would be able to ignore them. The galaxy had just witnessed the rise of a new power, humanity. The war was over, but the legacy of this battle would live on forever. The Galactic Empire would never forget the day they faced humanity and learned that even in the darkest times, there was always hope. And sometimes, that hope came from the most unexpected of places. The humans had won, and the galaxy would never be the same again.